I'm Katie, and I'm currently taking the Real Estate Pre-License course through Metro Brokers Academy School for Real Estate. I want to invite you to study with me on my channel. We will review all the chapters individually, as well as the vocabulary you need to know within each chapter. So don't forget to like and subscribe at the end. Without further ado, let's move on to today's topic. Real Estate Exam Prep, Rights Review Part 2, with Katie Landers Does Real Estate. Before we get started, let's take a look at today's outline regarding rights and all of the things we will be covering. You can find this outline in the description below this video. After we review this chapter, you can also look forward to a chapter quiz and vocabulary, so don't forget to subscribe. Let's get started. Encumbrances. Encumbrances are external limitations that restrict an owner's rights, use of property, or diminish its value. May be public, government imposed, or private. For government rights, which are public encumbrances, think PEAT, police power, eminent domain, taxation, and Escheat. Police power is the right of local, state, and national governments to enact and enforce laws that regulate the use of private property for the good of the community. For example, safety, health, morals, and general well-being. There is no guaranteed compensation if owner suffers loss or loss of value. Eminent domain is the government power to take property with or without consent from the owner when needed for a public purpose or benefit. The U.S. Constitution guarantees that the public purpose must be proven and just compensation is paid. Taxation is the right of local or state government to levy taxes on real property. You have taxed according to its value, which is ad valorem, and then also according to benefit, which is special assessment. Escheat is when the property ownership is a privilege and an obligation. The state government has a right to take over the property when it is abandoned or when an owner dies without a will and without heirs. Intestate. There are private encumbrances which create a lien. A lien is a monetary claim a creditor has on the property of a debtor, and the debtor's property is security for payment of the debt. Liens are categorized in several ways: voluntary or involuntary, statutory, act of legislature, usually involuntary, or equitable, arise out of justice or fair play, which is usually voluntary. They can also be specific or general. There are two major things we need to discuss when it comes to property rights of other persons' private encumbrances: liens and the affecting use. Let's talk liens. You have two categories of liens: general liens and specific liens. Let's take a look at general liens first. What is a general lien? A general lien encumbers all real and personal property owned by the debtor, including property owned before the lien was recorded and after the property was acquired. It must be recorded in a county where the debtor owns property. A general lien is involuntary. Now, what is a decedent stance? When someone dies, all liens on the decedent's properties must be satisfied before property passes to the heirs. Outstanding debts that cannot be paid out of the decedent's personal property create a lien against the real property, which can be sold to satisfy debt. What is a federal and state inheritance tax? It is a general lien against the taxpayer in the county they reside. What is federal and state income tax? It is a general lien against the taxpayer in the county they reside without court intervention. What is a judgment lien? It arises out of a lawsuit. When the plaintiff sues a defendant for damages and the plaintiff wins the suit, the court awards a judgment for a specific dollar amount. It is then recorded and becomes a lien against the defendant's real and personal property. A lien pendens is also filed. This is a legal notice that a lawsuit is pending and the outcome could affect the title to certain real estate. The second category of liens are what is called specific liens. Let's review. So what is a specific lien? It is an enforceable lien against only one parcel of property, regardless of how many other parcels a debtor might own. What is an attachment lien? An encumbrance created against land when the court is granted custody of the property to prevent the owner from conveying title while a suit for damages is being decided. By attaching the property, The person seeking damages is assured that the property will be available to satisfy a judgment if it is awarded by the court. What about a mechanics lien? By definition, it is also known as a material man's lien. It is a lien created by statute against real property. It exists for the purpose of securing payment to those persons who have performed work and/or furnished materials for the improvement, maintenance, or repair of real property against which the lien is recorded. Mechanics liens are involuntary statutory liens. It can either be expressed or implied. Consent must have been given by the owner for work and materials. What is a mortgage lien? By definition, it is a monetary claim against a specific property pledged by its owner as security for the repayment of a loan or other debt. It is a voluntary lien. In cases where the seller and the lender purchase money mortgage, the seller has a vendor's lien. What is a property tax lien? It's an involuntary lien where ad valorem tax is assessed based on the value of the property. Sometimes there are special assessments to pay for local improvements. Taxes are often paid through impounds by the lender, like an escrow account. What is a Vendee's lien? It's an involuntary lien which grants the court custody of a specific property to prevent the owner from transferring ownership while a suit for damages is being decided. The plaintiff must post a bond to cover damages if no judgment is awarded. What's a vendor's lien? By definition, it is also known as a purchase money mortgage or seller's lien. When a seller finances part of the purchase price and the purchaser pledges the property as security for the debt, the seller holds a vendor's lien against the property. Now that we've covered liens, let's discuss private encumbrances that affect the use of privately owned real estate, which may be limited or restricted by the rights of other people. You have the affecting use, which can be broken down by easements, encroachments, and private restrictions. Let's talk about easements. What is an easement? Written, non-possessory, intangible right one person has to use another person's land in a specific manner and for a specific purpose. The holder of the easement does not own the land but has the right of use. Easement appurtenant is where you have two separate properties, usually adjacent to one another, and must have different owners. The owner granting the easement is the servient estate, and the holder of the easement is the dominant estate. This type of easement runs with the land, meaning if ownership of either property is transferred, the easement goes with it. Easement in gross involves only one tract of land, the servient estate. It benefits a person rather than another parcel of land. It is a personal right to use the land of another and does not necessarily run with the land. You have personal easements in gross and commercial easements in gross. Personal easements in gross are easements in gross is irrevocable during the lifetime of a person to whom the easement is granted. For instance, use of someone's lake for fishing is not transferable. Commercial easement in gross are things such as utility easements, railroad right-of-ways, rights to erect billboards. These have valuable interests and are freely transferable and inheritable. How are easements created? Grant, reservation, agreement, necessity, prescription, implication, and condemnation. Grant is where an owner grants a specific right to another person to use grantor land. Reservation is where an owner might sell some land but reserve an easement in the deed. Agreement is where parties may express their interest to create an easement in a written agreement. Necessity is where an easement arises out of necessity when an owner sells land in such a way that deprives the buyer of reasonable access. You can't landlock someone's property. Prescription is acquired through continuous use of another person's property for a period of prescribed by law, usually about 10 to 20 years. Use must be open, visible, and notorious and without permission from the owner. Implication, when created by operation of law, where the law assumes an implied easement for reasonable access. Condemnation, when using eminent domain. The government can acquire an easement over privately owned land for public purposes through condemnation. Since easements do have value, the owner must be justly compensated. All right, but how are easements terminated? Release, merger, abandonment, prescription, and or necessity. Release. It can be released in writing by the dominant estate to the serving estate, but it needs to be recorded. Merger. If both properties come under one ownership, easement no longer exists. Abandonment. There must be a positive action that shows the holder of the easement will no longer use it. Non-use is not necessarily abandonment. Prescription. When the holder of the serving estate openly and continuously prevents the easement holder from using it for the statutory period of time. Necessity. If it were created by necessity, the easement will only last as long as the necessity lasts. And license. A license grants personal permission to use the land of another without creating an estate for the user. It is usually a short-term privilege and is not transferable or inheritable. What are private restrictions? Limitations on the use of one's property in order to protect the rights of others. When private restrictions conflict with zoning laws, the stricter requirement will always prevail. Covenants are promises made in a sales contract, lease, or deed that specify the property will or will not be used in a certain manner. The purpose is to preserve property values by establishing standards. Usually recorded with a plat, the grantor or the other parties can file an injunction to stop a prohibited use. If parties unduly delay in taking proper legal action, the right to exercise the covenant for a subject prohibited use can be lost. Conditions are usually found on the deed. Conditions differ from covenants because they don't usually have any time limits, but they run with the land indefinitely and require removal by a court. Lastly, what is an encroachment? An encroachment is when an improvement, building, or other attachment illegally extends beyond the boundaries of its owner's land into adjoining land or airspace. They are observable mainly by professional survey. And that's all I have for today's topic, folks. Thank you for studying with me, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.